when you try and get into a lasting recovery from gambling, possibly even from any addiction, one of the hardest things you have to do is come clean to those people closest to you, to family members, sometimes to friends, to maybe even your employer. But certainly, from my experience, one of the people I found it the hardest to come clean to and tell about my addiction was my partner, my now thankfully wife. But we'll talk more about my story in a bit. The reason I'm making this video is actually because it's something that a few people have now asked me to talk about, and that is how to approach the subject of your addiction, how to effectively come out the closet as an addict to the person who is closest to you, that be your partner or your wife, husband, whatever. That's what I'm going to talk about today. And a lot of this will apply to other people you have to come clean to as well, you know. And now, like I said, there will be quite a plethora of people you probably end up speaking to, not only because realistically it's your duty, but partially because these people will become your support network in the coming weeks, months, and years. Apologies in advance if I sound a little bit croaky. I'm a little bit under the weather. I wasn't actually going to make this video. I think I have spoken about this before, but like I say, I've had a few messages now asking for me to speak on the topic, and so I thought I would. I'm currently working on a much sort of bigger video, which is actually going to require quite a lot of editing and putting together. I'm battling away with iMovie at the moment, which is quite infuriating. So I do want to get a better bit of editing software to improve the quality, as I spoke about recently, improve the quality of my videos, the quality of my content going forward. If you want to help support me with that and help me get something like Premiere or bloody Final Cut or whatever to prevent my brain from exploding trying to use iMovie, then you can support me on my Patreon, and there will be a link in the description below for that. If you want to support me in another way, just like and subscribe, watch the videos, and leave a comment. That's very much appreciated. As I say, coming clean to the people in your life that are closest to you is definitely one of the hardest steps to getting into recovery. But I will say at the very front end of this video that it is probably one of the biggest and most essential when it comes to maintaining your recovery. Gambling addiction thrives on secrecy. Secrecy is what allows us to maintain this addiction far, far longer than we should, to put off addressing it for far, far longer than we should. And as I said multiple times, you know, most addictions, particularly sort of chemical or substance addiction, so alcoholism, you know, drug addiction, all those sorts of things have very obvious outward symptoms. Even like cigarettes, you know, have a very obvious outward symptom. Gambling addiction doesn't, and it's the secrecy that allows it to thrive. So coming clean, telling people, is absolutely essential, because not only will they form as part of your support network, but they will also be actively looking out for the signs that you have lapsed, that you have relapsed, and that you're gambling again. I have made a video, although I may well talk about it again, about if you are their partner, if you're looking at this from the other side, you know, the things to look out for, the secrecy, the hiding your phone away, the constantly checking your phone, particularly at a time, maybe Saturday afternoon when the football's on. You know, being very, very secretive and very, very sensitive to any suggestions that you may be gambling, or any, you know, questions around your gambling. You know, how much did you lose? Blah, blah, blah. You know, now a casual player, a casual gambler won't mind telling you that they've lost a tenner on the footy. All right, but if people start, if the person that you're with gets defensive, gets angry, then, you know, it could be a symptom that they are indeed struggling with this addiction. But that's a story for another day, and that's something we'll talk about in the future. So how do we go about addressing this topic? Now, I think there are two very, very important things when it comes to speaking about your addiction. And the first one is honesty. Total transparency. As I say, gambling addiction thrives on secrecy. So if we withhold any details, any information about our addiction and about the effect that addiction has had on our lives, our finances, maybe we've lost a job, maybe we have debts, maybe we have other things that we need to address as part of our recovery other than stopping gambling. We need to be open and honest about these things. Now, obviously, we don't need to regale our partner with all the stories of our gambling losses, but if they ask questions, if they ask, you know, how much debt are you in? You know, when did you last gamble? When did this start? All these sorts of things they are probably going to want to know. Then you owe it to them, but also to yourself and to your recovery, to be completely open and honest. If we hide things, if we don't give them the full truth, then in essence what we're doing is we are leaving a door slightly ajar in order to allow those gambling demons back in next time we experience an urge. If we are dishonest about our financial situation, particularly in an instance where, like myself, I was sharing finances, sharing rent and bills and all the rest of it with my partner, my now wife, then that is doing a disservice to them. But also it could be potentially harmful for your joint living situation in the future. I always say to people who have a partner who is an addict, a gambling addict, that they need to financially protect themselves. And in order to do that, they need to distance themselves, at least in the short to medium term, from the addict. And so it is important that you, as the addict, are open, honest, and completely transparent as to the situation you're currently in. If you're receiving phone calls and letters and debt collectors and all the rest of it, then be honest. Because that way that you are no longer hiding this from your partner. You owe it to them. And off the back of that, that also gives you peace of mind. Once you open up, once you are honest, once you have told the situation in total, truth and transparency, then you no longer need to fear the unexpected letters. You don't need to worry about someone coming knocking on the door trying to collect some money. You don't need to try and explain away why the home phone's been ringing. Do people still have home phones? While the landline's been ringing constantly with random numbers from random parts of the country that you're unfamiliar with. 0330 seems to be a common one. I don't know whether there's a lot of debt collectors around that area, but there you go. Because you can explain it. So be open, be honest, not just for them, but also for yourself and for, getting it off your chest. And I will stop myself there and say this is not therapy for you. There is counselling there. There's counselling available. There'll be links in the description below. There are a number of gambling addiction charities that you can reach out to who will be able to point you in the direction of a therapist. Now, it might be that your partner is happy to sit and talk to you and allow you to talk through your addictions. Okay? But it might be that they're not. And they are not there to act as your therapist. They are not there to act as your counsellor. This is, something that you are putting onto them. Just because someone does bad things doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. Addicts aren't necessarily bad people. They're ill people. And that's like myself, sorry. They're ill people. But you have still done these actions. You still have to take personal responsibility for this. This is not their fault. This is something you are effectively doing to them. So, act in that way. Allow them to be angry. Allow them to be disappointed. Allow them to ask questions and afford them honest and open and transparent answers. Because, like I say, whilst this may not be completely, in the eyes of some, your fault because you're suffering from addiction, it's certainly the actions that you have undertaken, that have caused this particular situation. So give as much patience as possible to any questions. And like I say, anger is very possible. I spoke to various people about my addiction, and there was a whole plethora of responses, from anger, to disappointment, to genuine concern and sympathy and support. And of course, the latter is, what you want. But I think a healthy mix of all of them is certainly a good motivation to stay in recovery. And that leads me kind of on to my second point, which is don't make excuses. Yes, gambling addiction is a terrible affliction. It is a mental disorder and is recognised as such. But as I said, it is still our responsibility to deal with our own actions. If we make excuses, then we are simply trying to distance ourselves from the very thing we are coming clean about. All right, you can't basically open up and just admit defeat and say this thing's got me beaten, and then come out with a but or a however or I did it because. Now there may be many things. There may be many life experiences, some historic, some more immediate triggers that lead us to gamble, that lead us to partake in any kind of harmful behaviour or addiction. However, to reference these when it comes to coming clean and talking about your recovery is merely a way of distancing yourself from responsibility. And in order to get into a recovery, not only do we need to stop, not only do we need to want to stop, but also we need to take responsibility for our actions going forward and take action to prevent us from behaving in these negative, destructive ways as and when urges take place in the future. The final thing I will say is that this is an incredibly important step. All right, this is going to be very, very hard, and the temptation is to go, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself into recovery, and then further down the line, it's not going to matter. I can repair the damage I've done, I can get the money back, I can recover, and then maybe in some time in the future when I'm in a much better place, I can talk retrospectively to my partner and to those people closest to us about my addiction. Two problems, all right? Firstly, if you're not open and honest now, then the gambling demons will thrive on that secrecy, and you will lapse, and you'll probably relapse at some point in the future. Secondly, you are doing a big disservice to that person. Like I say, particularly in a marriage or a place where you are mutually financially supporting each other. All right. Now, gambling isn't a financial problem as we know. It is an addiction problem. It is a behavioural problem, but it causes financial issues. And if you're not open and honest with those people closest to you, right, not only are you keeping a potential financial lifeline there to allow you to gamble, but what you're doing is a disservice to them, and you're not affording them the ability to protect themselves financially from your potential lapses behaviour. I think that's about it. Like I say, I would love to tell you that the best thing you can do is not tell them, recover, and then tell them later. That's a very bad idea because, yeah, like I say, it will thrive on the secrecy, and you're also doing them a disservice. And also you're doing yourself a disservice because you're denying yourself that support network and those extra eyes and ears that are looking out for those telltale signs. I'd love to tell you that it's easy. I'd love to tell you that you're going to open up to your partner and they're going to give you a big hug and be supportive and say, I'm here for you, you know, everything's going to be great, we'll work through this together. Now, that might happen. And whilst my wife wasn't quite that way, there was definitely anger there and there was definitely a lot of questions. All right, she was supportive of me and she continues to be so. And, you know, I can't be more thankful for that. But that won't necessarily be the case. There may be a lot of anger, there may be shouting, there may be partial temporary separation, there might be permanent separation. I can't promise you there won't be, but all I can tell you is that if you don't have this conversation, then things aren't going to get better, they're only going to get worse. On that emotional note, I'm going to leave you to it. Thanks for watching. Sorry, I've been a bit croaky and a bit whatever. Stay safe, stay sane. Remember, there'll be a Patreon link in the description below. Like I said, I've got a video I'm putting together now which is requiring a lot of editing. It's about a topic that I don't normally talk about, but there's been a lot of developments recently, particularly around crypto and things like that. I'm sure you can imagine what I'm alluding to, that I think needs addressing, and I'm not sure I'm the person to address it, but I think I may. But yeah, if you want to support me in getting some better editing software so I don't end up throwing my Mac out the window, then yeah, Patreon link in the description below. Stay safe and sane, everyone. Speak to you soon. All the best.